Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Kucsera, and in this episode of Fantasy Lore and More, Dante is joining me to talk about her book, The Base, Book 1. So tell us about The Base, Book 1.
Okay, The Base, Book 1, and I will read an excerpt as soon as you tell me to.
Sure.
It's about a military base where the top scientists go, and they have to create an invention as per their contract with the military. And it's a very high security, exceptionally isolated base because this is a very, very sought after thing that they're doing, and it is very, very necessary. But as they are working really, really hard to perfect their invention, there are spies and thieves working just as hard to steal their invention. So it really is a roller coaster that you have the villains and then you have the scientists, and the scientists have insane amount of intelligence, and they have been studying things since they were born. I mean, they were really, really inquisitive kids, and then they grew up to be what they are now, military research scientists. And so they're matching their wits with these drop dead awful villains, and trying to stay a step ahead of them. And the villains, all it is for them is just a paycheck. If they steal this thing and they could sell it to the highest bidder, that's what they're in it for. So it's really interesting the tools that they have at their disposal to fight with each other, because you're dealing with the top scientific minds, and it's these three scientists in the middle of nowhere. And spoiler alert, I mean, everybody's favorite seems to be the bug man, and his expertise is in insects.
Oh, wow.
And so, I mean, he can dream up ways to fight back that a lot of bad guys are not expecting. And then he also does a lot of interesting things with his study of insects over the years with the military. It doesn't take too much imagination to look at a helicopter, for example, and say, you know what, that does look like a dragonfly a bit. They may have come up with the design for that thing by stealing some elements from, an insect that we all know. And there are other pieces of military equipment and stuff that if you look at them kind of closely, you can say, you know what, that kind of, they stole some of that from a bug or whatever. And so, so the three scientists, they each have their own specialty, their own niche that they are so incredibly familiar with. And so when the villains come to try to steal their invention, which is a pool of all their talents, they combine their expertise to make this invention. And it has the attributes you can see from each scientist's expertise in it. When the villains come for that, the scientists know how to fight back in ways that I'm sure they didn't anticipate.
So is this sounds more contemporary is this contemporary, or is this set in like a second world? Or
no, actually it is set in the real world. It is contemporary.
Yeah.
And it's actually not that long ago. And it was funny to me because I had to do tons of research to make the book as factually accurate as possible. I wasn't going to tell somebody that, there's a dragonfly in this area when dragonflies are only, located on these three continents under these ideal sort of living conditions. That's just an example.
Okay.
But to make things factually accurate, and I had to do tons of research, I was amazed at how many of the things that I was researching that are currently in research and development. And there are lab races going on some of the things that are, happening in the book. I'm a daughter of a, yes.
That's cool.
That was really exciting to me, and especially exciting because I'm a daughter of a research scientist. So I would occasionally talk to my father about some of these things and be like, wow, did you know that there is a race on to come up with this particular element or that element. And he would say, I'm not surprised. I mean, I'll give you not a total spoiler, but
Mhm.
let's say, for example, you could come up with a synthetic cartilage that would not be rejected by people. Well, imagine all those people who have to get knee replacements every year. Instead of going through all that drama and then, the rehabilitation and everything like that, imagine just simply getting an injection.
That
And
would be neat.
yeah, so I was really, really surprised at so many of the avenues I set out to research to bring this story together and make all of the components real and stuff. I was incredibly surprised to find out how many of these things are in the research stage and are in the development stage and have applications beyond the military scope. But, for example, a pharmaceutical company would love fake cartilage, you know,
Yeah.
and, so that the Army always had a dream of a soldier that could repair itself. And, that the armies could involve less people and more fighters that were robotic and or stealth or drone. And so it is very interesting taking all of those elements, putting them together and making book soup with it, but then maintaining a storyline and maintaining a cohesive plot and characters that have depth and stuff.
Wow. That's interesting that some of this is more fact than fiction.
Well, there's so many things going on right now with research in just so many areas. It's just unbelievable. Um, they are developing implants that could take the thoughts from your head. They had a demonstration on the news about it, how they would tell somebody to think, make that bowling ball go to the left, or make it go to the right. And with their own thoughts, they could control some of that. And so there's a lot, there's just so many different areas of research going on and just so many things happening. We're living in an age of idea development that's going at warp speed. So it's a very exciting time for those of us who like to think.
Yeah, it sounds it. And now the book has an interesting cover with the different elements on it. There's
Hmm.
like a roost. Was it a rooster statue? There's like a crystal or glass ball, and there's some a paper with 3 drawings. Can you talk about what those elements represent from the story?
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to hold up the book cover so the folks at home could see it. And there it is. And so if we look at the drawing, for instance, of this particular bug has so many names. Some people call it a berry bug. Some people call it a pill bug. Some people call it a potato bug. It is on all 7 continents. It's usually under like leaves or under a log or in something that where there's some moisture and darkness, but it is the one bug, and everyone has seen it, that when it is crawling, if you tap it, it'll turn into a little round ball and roll away. So, so the diagrams are the diagrams of the actual bug. And the bug man in the book presented those diagrams, and the military is very interested in the applications and things that can be done with a weapon like that. Right now, almost all of the drones that we know about are flying drones.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is interesting that the military is very, very much enamored by the idea of having drones that can be on land and then also be submersible. And I have seen bomb diffusing drones, and they actually look like spiders. And they open up a drawer in it, and they stick the bomb in, and then they close the drawer and lock it, and then the bomb goes off. But the structure of the spider, or whatever you want to call it, and they have them in some of the major cities, It stays intact. I mean, it just jumps. I mean, so they do have bomb diffusing drones, but they don't really have, drones that are land drones and submersible
Hmm.
for combat. And almost all of the armies in the world want one thing. They want fewer humans engaged in combat. And it's a goal of theirs to have, combat be more automated and to utilize drones and robots and stuff to do that. So the Bugman's idea was very, very appealing to have a bug like that pill bug that could roll up and roll away, but then also could just march on and be, low to the ground and sort of undetected and, also get wet and be fine.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Thank you.
That's and it makes sense that they would want like drones that don't just fly, because there's now people are looking above for flying drones. If you had something small that could, move through the grass or something undetected, you could get information and they would know. Like that's just neat.
Well, also, I mean, armies are not always loyal. There are a lot of people who are double agents and spies and this and that and the other thing. If you have an automated army, and by the way, the drone does not have to be the size of that little bug that it is patterned after, because that's a very tiny bug. But if you have an army that is automated, you can, in theory, make that a loyal army, unless someone decides to hack it.
That's true.
So there's a lot of twists and turns.
So it sounds like this is more of like a military spy thriller, which is totally fine. I love military thrillers and military sci-fi and all of that. It's some of my favorite genres to read. But I just want to put it in context for the podcast listeners. Like, what genre do you feel the base fits into?
Well, I do think it's definitely got a lot of suspense in it.
Okay.
Maybe it's suspenseful fiction that is got a side order of sci-fi. But it is routed, like you say, in a contemporary. But then and the scene is, once you get into that book, once you get past a few paragraphs, you're in there. I mean, you understand their surroundings and you feel like you're in their world. It's a very easy adaptation for the reader, that is. But basically, I would say it is military sci-fi, but also suspense and suspenseful fiction and thriller, definitely. It's got all those elements.
That's cool. That's cool. I was just curious because this is a fantasy podcast, and I was like, where's the fantasy in this?
Well, there is. I mean, the fantasy is definitely in the invention, totally. Especially when you pull these three scientists and their expertise and you have them make this creation. I mean, that is 100% fantasy. Okay. And then having them interact and control the creation. And then the other side trying to intercept the creation. There are things there that, as far as I know, have not happened yet and are not real yet. But, they may be. But definitely these two competing armies, if you will, I mean, the military scientists versus the villains who do work for a different type of army, competing for control of this thing which does not yet exist, but, who knows what may happen in the future? Maybe it will.
That would be interesting. Should we go to the excerpt now? I think we've suspended everyone's interest long enough. I think we should hear from the characters now in their own words. Okay, so I'm going to read. Before I met them, I absolutely hated spiders. There were tons of them here in this hellhole.
That's what my mother called this place. The worst base in the country, surrounded by nothing, located in nowhere, the center of flat as a pancake, dusty flat prairie, with just enough scruffy weeds to hold down some of the topsoil, while the rest always managed to blow in your eyes in the never-ending wind. It was bitter cold for 9 months of the year, followed by a day or two of spring, and then it was tornado season for the rest of the year. A person could get used to just about anything, but my mother would never get used to this. She had lived in other bases with my father before I came along. Places with trees, she said bitterly, and something to do. But we had to be here because this is where they send you when you work on secrets. So here we are, and I'm watching my mother shriek as she madly swats the side of the house with the broom to disperse the ugly gray cloud of spiders that warm themselves there in the afternoon sun. I'm standing 15 feet away and I'm still screaming. My father has assured me many times how they are harmless, how their long legs is where they got their name, Daddy Longlegs. He makes fun of their wobble walk whenever I'm crying in terror about them, and tells me how they always stay in the sunny spot of the wall. When the sun moves, so do they, he marvels. They just love a sun bath. While my father is out working, my mother is going to war with them. Though none of them have ever dared to enter the threshold of our decrepit little house, my mother is not pacified in the least. The only good spider is a dead spider, she says. She thrashes the side of the house while she yells at all the world I'm not supposed to hear like a mad demon. Occasionally a neighbor or two or one of my friends will watch. The old drunk man who always sits outside laughs at it every time. This is the definition of futility, he says. They'll be back tomorrow after they have 1,000,000 babies tonight. My mother gags in revulsion. Another day in the hellhole, about 40 miles from the bar and 70 miles from the only store in the county which does not sell any bug spray or insect poison of any kind because they understand it's hopeless. Just like the secret base in downtown hell with nothing to do but kill the spiders. Okay, so that is an excerpt from the very beginning of the book.
So she's looking back, or which characters?
This is the daughter of one of the
That's
research
what I thought.
scientists. Yeah.
So, so this daughter is then going to be, so it's written first person in this book. So I guess the daughter is then going to be the main character of the book.
Well, she is, for most of the book, she is a narrator.
Okay.
And she's giving us a child's eye view of what she sees.
Okay. So the main, okay. Gotcha. So she, God, I get it now. So she's narrating about all the things you're talking about in the blurb. Okay.
Right. So they are in the most secret base in the country.
Right.
And one of the reasons that they're there in this like god awful climate and everything like that is because you want to keep the spies away. I mean, there aren't many people who are going to subject themselves to that environment, for a period of time just to steal an idea or steal an invention. It's really going to be the hardcore ones that are going to do that. And so they, in the beginning of the book, you're just sort of introduced to the surroundings and sort of introduced to the why. Like, this is why we have to be here. This is where they send you if you are going to work on secrets.
Makes sense. Yeah, you would want to put them somewhere hard to get to so you can control access.
Yeah, and then hard and unpleasant. I mean, I'm sure like if you're working on something super top secret, every spy in the world would love to go to, oceanfront, Hawaii or some type of resort area or something like that. But just putting them in a forbidding climate. And when I lived in South Dakota, I experienced several forbidding climates that were very similar to what I describe in the book. And there are few people that are going to have the discipline to stick with an area like that. So unless there's a really big payout anticipated, a lot of these spies are just not going to stick around. They try to make it as hard as possible. So then they can get their work accomplished without too much intervention, but there's still people trying to steal it.
Yeah, I mean, of course, everybody wants the secrets. So, all right, so it's the child narrator throughout the book, seeing all the intrigue and the espionage and all of that. Does she grow up in this, or it's like a compressed timeline where she stays a child?
Let me see. She does grow up a bit. I think I have another part that I can share with you.
Sure. It's just between, like, when you were talking about the book, like, I expected something very different than what you read. So I'm like struggling. It's like
Yeah.
in a story like that, usually you're in the mind of those characters, and that's what I was expecting, because I read a lot of military. I read a lot of military suspense and military thrillers and military
Right.
science fiction, and you're always in the mind of those characters that are in the top secret base, not their, like, you may get occasionally a point of view of like their child or something, but it's rare. Usually you're in the mind of the adults who are doing the interesting stuff and dealing with the situation. So that's what I was expecting in the excerpt. So it's like throwing me for a loop that that's not what we got.
No, it's in some ways it makes it more interesting that you have the child's perspective of some of these things, because the kid doesn't totally have the vocabulary. So
Right.
I'm going to give you
Sure.
another scene here. There was a knock at the door, and my father went to answer it. I can hear the bugman's voice, and it did not sound good. My father grabbed his shoes and ran to their house. My mother stood up and walked briskly to the door. She turned around and said, "I'll be right back. Just stay inside," and then left. I heard banging, and I saw my father knocking on Mr. Clark's door in a panic. When the door opened, Mr. and Mrs. Clark ran outside to the bugman's house. All hell was breaking loose. The door opened again, and our porch light sputtered as it tried in vain to stay lit. I could see the light flash on Spencer and Pam Clark like an old camera as they came up to our porch in the dark. My mother rushed in behind them and told them to have a seat. She gave them the untouched plates of breakfast that my parents hadn't started, and hurriedly put a carton of juice on the table, and then she ran out the door again. Something was really wrong, and we knew it. After several minutes, my father emerged and raced over to the old man's house and shouted back to Mr. Clark that the van was gone, and proceeded to knock on the door and jiggle the knob frantically. Finally, he spun around and went to the bugman's home, where Mr. Clark was on the porch fuming. "Never saw it coming," he said, "never." They were in a huddle, and I could tell they were very mad. My father and the bugman were jabbing in the air as they talked rapidly and were getting loud. Let me see. The prophet's door opened, and my father lost his cool and shouted sarcastically, "Come and get it, fresh news. Get it from the source this time." His face was red, and he was fiercely angry. "Excuse me," the prophet said. "We were robbed." "What do you mean robbed?" my father said. "We had 2 visitors last night. They took my wallet and George's keys." We saw the old man shuffle out now on the prophet's step. His jaw dropped in shock, and yelled, "They took the van." Who did this? Everyone was yelling now, and it was nothing but chaos. So this,
Go ahead.
yeah, this is a scene that sets up a an attempt, actually, a successful attempt at stealing the invention. And now the scientists have to ward that off.
Right. And how is because she's a kid, how is she going to view any of that? Because aren't they just going to, like, lock her in the house where she won't be able to see anything?
Well, they do, but then things go to when the adults are you know doing some of these interventions and fighting to retain custody of the invention. Then the perspective shifts to their point of view, like what they're seeing, and them giving controls to the invention. And so it is, so the perspective doesn't always come from the child's eye view.
Okay.
It does shift when things are happening. I can give you another little snippet, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. The running joke about Pool Town, first and foremost, is the name of the bar. Yes, there's a pool table there with a few pool balls, and maybe there are 2 pool sticks left, but no one has ever played pool there. The pool table is only used to play cards. The rain is merciless this morning, and the sides of the roads, which are usually dusty, flat dirt, have now turned into swollen mud. It will yield not one blade of grass or single flower, save for the occasional clump of scrubweed, as we call it, which might turn into tumbleweed right before the winter, where it will be trapped under the snow for 9 months. Since it's morning, the lights in the exterior sign of the bar will not be lit until the timer lights them, which happens every day at 5 p.m., regardless of how dark it is outside. I think this is it, the bugman says, and they pull into the parking lot and scream when they see the white van in the back. They run out of the car and open the van door. Vector 1 sends a message. Revised environmental scan. The bugman turns the keys in the van ignition and slaps on the interior lights of the ceiling. Vector 1 sends a message. Revised environmental scan. Mr. Clark shouts out the car window frantically, just drive it, just drive it. The bugman climbs into the driver's seat of the van while my father drives the car so Mr. Clark can command Vector 1 to power up. He was going to need it. So I know all of these are taken from separate parts of the book and that they're somewhat out of context, but now you can see what it is like when, after a frantic search, they manage to zero into where their creation is hidden and take it back.
Yeah, no, thanks for doing the multiple excerpts. I think it really helps to give an idea of how this, the writing style and like how the story is presented without giving away too much of the plot, which I think is important. No, it sounds like it's a really interesting story. And now this is book 1 of a series, right?
Yes. The second book is complete, and tomorrow we are having a photo shoot.
Oh, what's going to be on the cover of the second book?
Well, I was very fortunate to have 3 actors promise themselves. And so we have, you can't see it, but on the other side of the apartment, the place is loaded with props. And then in addition to the props, we're all going to dress as if we are in this very abandoned military base. We have found a wonderful couple who live in what, from the highway at least, looks like a very desolate and abandoned farm. And inside that barn, they have 2 vintage Jeeps. One of them is 1941, one of them is 1951.
Oh.
And yeah, and so I found out some really interesting details about it, because when he was driving it, the tailpipe sticks up in the air. And I said, why do they have the tailpipe do that? And he said, well, sometimes, the Jeeps had to rush through like pretty deep water. And if you have the tailpipe where most cars' tailpipes are now, if they're driving through water, that water is just going to go inside and flood the engine and ruin the car. So it's really cool. They have the tailpipes up in the air, and they they're almost like smokestacks. They spout some smoke. And I'm amazed also at the interior, how small they are. I grew up in this era, and I've been in SUVs and vans and stuff like that. But when you see the pictures from battle, and you see how many people crammed themselves into a Jeep, and then you actually sit in one, like I'm a relatively small person, and it was, it was a tight squeeze. So we're going to have the 2 Jeeps in this abandoned, desolate farm in front of an old dilapidated barn with the 3 actors who are going to portray Cullen, the Bugman, and Mr. Clark. And so there are ample amounts of clothes here and things, but then there is also one of the villains who will be hiding somewhere that she thinks that they can't see her. And she is just drop dead evil and very, very persistent. She always, switches cars, has wigs and other things like that in the glove compartment, many disguises and stuff. And she has so many tools at her disposal. And she is also an identical twin. So I had to do lots of research on identical twins. And I did find out something very interesting about them. Twins have identical twins do have identical DNA, and they are identical in every way, but the fingerprints. So naturally this opened up, and I know I'm not the first writer to dive into this, lots of possibilities as to what this person could do. And so she had been separated from her twin, and they both had been adopted into different families. So the nature-nurture thing comes in. But the villain is drop-dead evil villain. Just drop-dead evil. And she knows she has an identical twin out there, so if she ever needs someone to take the fall for her, wouldn't that be convenient?
Yeah.
You wouldn't think an author like me would do that, do you?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's our job as authors, is to do stuff like that.
Yes,
that's
indeed.
not a good question to ask to a fellow author. Anytime would you you wouldn't think an author do that? The answer is always yes.
Yes, yes, indeed. We sort of feel compelled to do stuff like that. I mean,
yes.
It's like that Jurassic Park quote where, like, instead of thinking, should we do it or could we do it,
Mm-hmm.
But in our case, yeah, we should do that. That would be cool. And then it goes a little further than that, but I won't totally give it all away.
Yeah, no, got to leave something for the readers to discover.
Well, Venus, the villain, and there's a few villains in that story to match the 3 scientists, but
Mm-hmm.
Venus is, Venus should see a cardiologist because she doesn't have a heart. She is about as drop-dead evil and poisonous as you can imagine, and she would sell anything, regardless of who it would affect or anything like that. She has grown addicted to her very comfortable lifestyle and her wonderful neighborhood and all of the things that it affords her. I mean, she likes going to have tea in the very exclusive tea house. She likes to go on antiquing crawls, and she likes to do all of these privileged things. But if only her neighbors and some of the elite knew what she actually did for a living, they would probably run away screaming. But as an author, I think we had to do that, didn't we?
Yeah, usually if we think of it, we're like, well, now that I thought about it, I kind of have to do this because I'm now curious what will happen.
Yes, what will happen if we stick the most drop-dead evil villain that we can possibly think of in a very, very exclusive, snooty community, and then see if she can steal these military devices, and while her neighbors have their landscapers working and the pool boys out there working and stuff like that. It might make the neighborhood a little bit more dramatic, but she tries to keep it low key to fit in. Because as an author, I mean, maybe we should try that.
I think we're all too busy writing to care if we fit in anywhere.
Yeah. No, but she has situated herself in a community that does care, where people sort of, where there's, code enforcement making sure that your grass isn't more than 4 inches tall, and all these other things like that. And so she has, she likes fine things. She likes fancy cars. She likes big houses. She likes wonderful zip codes. So she likes all these good things, and she's right in there, but, you know, maybe she doesn't quite fit in.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it depends on the place. If they care more about the aesthetics, they may not look too hard at the person. Although she might be just really good at masking her evil around them. But nobody is completely evil through and through. That's that's a trope in books. It's not like real in real life, because even the most wicked people out there, they still have wives or girlfriends or boyfriends, depending on what they're into, or families, and it's they other people become other people are other, and they don't care so much about them, but they have their they've got something, or their pet, or that something that moves them.
Yeah, they do have a little soft spot. Like one of the villains that she works very closely with, Max, says that he likes kids. He likes puppies, but he likes money more, because if he has money, then he can have all the kids and all the puppies he wants. So that's Max.
That's an interesting motivation.
Well, that's how he. That's sort of the backbone of their philosophy, that they can, whatever it is they want, or whatever it is that keeps them happy and keeps them satisfied. They just have to have enough money to get that, and they aren't particularly concerned with how they get the money. They just get the money.
That's true, because they don't exactly have the same moral compass that the rest of us have.
No, they have none. And there's parts of the book that are very, very funny about that, where they sort of joke about their lack of moral compass. And Venus says things like, "Well, I'm always looking for another way to fleece people without having to, you know, live by the rules, or, pay taxes or contribute in any way. I'd always like to find another way to get my fangs into someone's wallet."
Mm-hmm.
And so they do have a sense of humor about some of the things that they do. And there are some parts there that are very, very funny. I mean, really funny, not just to me, but to some of the readers and such. But then, because we have so many different tools at our disposal, we have these villains who just want money and don't care about what they have to do to get it. And then we have these spies that are, very geeky and very, very smart and know what they're doing, and, like to give the villains a smackdown when they need it, using whatever tools they have at their disposal. Like maybe you will have a bunch of mosquitoes coming after you, or something, something else, and from the insect arsenal, or from Mr. Cullen's expertise and Mr. Clark's expertise as a programmer and stuff. So they each have their forte, and the villains also have a forte too. They don't want to give up an inch in their lifestyle. They want to just get bigger and bigger and bigger. They're addicted to the rush. They're addicted to it. So, and in the middle of all of it is the invention, and the tug of war over the invention, and who that invention is going to have loyalty to.
That's interesting that the invention can have loyalty. It kind of implies that it has some level of sentience.
Well, with AI now, they are actually programming in a degree of feelings and stuff like that into a lot of the electronic components. I mean, even when I'm typing an email, it's one step ahead of me. I'm sure you've experienced that when you're trying to, it already
But a lot
has.
of that is like it's just predicting what the most likely next word is. It's like what we have now is not actual sentience. That would be AGI, and you're still like, I've seen all different estimates, but we're a long way from that. And a lot of what the large language models are doing is because they've ingested so much content, they're predicting based on the patterns of words that you're using, what the next thing you might say might be.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. But you're right. It's not totally an AI thing, but they're definitely working on trying to appear more compassionate and trying to get some of those traits. I think I've experienced that more when I've had to deal with a robot when I've had to call a number. Like when you're trying to get an issue resolved, like
yeah, those conversations are heavily scripted. A lot of that is program. I work in IT, so I have a little bit more insight into some of this. A lot of that is just heavy programming and scripts that they're following. So they're not actually intelligently conversing with you,
right.
and it's just a program of responses that they have, because you're often limited in what you can say to them,
Right.
because you're not actually listening. You have to pick from a bunch of options.
Right. I've been there. We all have.
Yeah. So,
but they're getting there. They're trying to make it more simpatico and stuff like that. I found it so interesting. About a month ago, my friend's mother had to have a cancerous kidney removed, and the robot did the surgery.
Yeah, it's very cool how they can program them to do those precise things, because some surgeries are very difficult to do because the body is there's some parts of your body that are just very small, and there's like not a lot of room for error. But if you can program something to within tolerances of like mere millimeters, that's a much safer than a person, because a robot's hand is not going to shake. It doesn't have nerves. So
Right.
I think that stuff is very cool, especially because a lot of surgeries are just a very tiny area that they have to operate on, like your vein or something, and it's very high degree of error. It's very cool.
And also there's sometimes a lot of things in a very small space. And you don't want to hit the wrong thing.
Yep. That's very true. The human body is very crowded inside, which is probably a good thing for us to keep living, because all the systems are kind of interdependent. But we wandered pretty far from the book, so we should come back to it. Is there anything else you want to say about the base, book 1, or book 2, since we also mentioned that?
Sure. Yeah. So the base book 1, you also mentioned other things on the cover. Yes, we
Yes.
do
Oh,
have that.
yeah. That's right. I forgot. There was the glass ball
Yep.
and the.
So we have the top secret envelope, and every couple of there's an interval every couple of weeks or whatever. The base commander will give the scientists an envelope, and there will be an assignment for them, and they have to fulfill the assignment. And when they make their invention has to have all of the attributes and characteristics and limitations that are specified in that spec sheet, which is in the top secret folder. And so the military, tells them all kinds of things, like, say, for example, the temperature requirements that this thing is going to have to handle because of the battlefields that they expect it to be in. And if those battlefields have conditions like wind and sandstorms, then this land drone is also going to have to be able to handle those attributes. But the temperature, like, say, for example, the outside temperature in a place like Saudi Arabia can get up to like 125 degrees. Well, what is the temperature inside a military vehicle? And so it has to be able to handle, those things, and the wind and the sand, but it also has to be able to do things like sense if someone else is trying to program it. And if it senses that it is getting unwelcome outside influence, it can switch a channel of communication. It can detonate. I mean, it has a whole list of options that in its menu of how to respond to these infiltrations and these attacks, and trying to get it to become subservient to a new party. And so the spec sheet is, and sometimes it's kind of laughable because you hear this list
Mhm.
and it just sounds impossible. Like, how on earth are they going to achieve this? But then the three of them are such brainiacs, and they have such a diverse spectrum of knowledge to offer that they can combine their resources and achieve something with all of that, um, all of that madness. And sometimes their ideas come from the knowledge that the Bugman contributes, or sometimes it
Okay.
comes from the knowledge that Mr. Clark contributes, because Mr. Clark is the guy that, say, for example, we were to make a robotic spider, he would be the programmer who would be able to tell that spider, you're going to run 10 meters front and then 2 meters to the left. Or you are going to flatten yourself down now and contract because someone is trying to look at you. So he does all of the programming for these robotic drones. That's what he contributes. And he also he's very savvy. I mean, he knows when they're being infiltrated and how to
Mhm.
ward off these things at the pass. And then Mr. Cullen, as he's called in the book, um, he invents the materials that are being used for this, because the Army had the audacity to say that they want it as transparent as possible and they want it as flexible as possible. And he had shown all these scientists were all nabbed from different bases when they showed extreme aptitude in their area of expertise. And so Cullen was nabbed when he was doing research on synthetic cartilage, and also making what he called biocaulk, where you could fuse things and then there wouldn't be the tissue rejection and stuff like that. So to be able to make a drone that could heal itself, and then also have the flexibility that we associate with cartilage, and be able to withstand the shocks and stuff that cartilage can and stuff like that. That was a really, really valuable attribute to their creation. And so just putting those three minds together and putting all those various jewels that they had in their arsenal together to help create this thing that that could take a hit and that could handle getting wet, and that could roll itself up or crawl and stuff, and then be as much of a stealth device as possible, that it's not detectable.
Mhm.
It has just a lot of very valuable attributes, not just to another army. And when we think of people who would want to steal that, our mind first goes to armies. But there's also the cartels, like they have armies. And then there are then there's the spies and thieves, like they might want to have their own obedient army that's not going to be a double agent and stuff. And so there's just a whole list of possibilities that present itself in the story.
No, it sounds very cool, this invention. It definitely sounds like something that we might actually need in the real world.
Well, I think a lot of the attributes we do. I mean, I was really surprised to see that there is an active race out there to make synthetic cartilage.
Mhm.
And you
It
think
would
of,
be
there's just
useful.
so many, so
Yeah.
many applications for that. And so a lot of the attributes, there are active races for it. And then you see Venus also stealing other ideas from a few other places, and that helps to establish her character and what she does for a living. And so, for instance, when I was researching an idea that she was stealing, like she was trying to steal something that would have an off-label use against SIDS. It was really interesting to me to see that there is an active race for development for that even out there. So there's just, anytime I turned around, I would find a race. I would find a research race to come up with all these things.
That's really cool. So where can people get the base, book 1?
Okay, the base book 1 is on Amazon. Let me see. And all you have to do is just type in the Dante, the base, and then you will see it. And let me see, that is where the sequel will show up after we do our photo shoot and, you know, a little more things to that. And so, and then I do have a website, which I had given you also, DanteTherese.com. And so there is definitely more coming. I know it isn't like this is not a cookie cutter book. I mean, it's definitely not. It doesn't neatly exactly fit into one category. I mean, there is fantasy in this. But there's also some sci-fi in it and stuff like that. But it just and there's a lot of suspense in it, but it doesn't neatly fit into one category. So I really appreciate how you're hanging in there with me, because I know you know, you're not totally cookie cutter yourself, and neither are the stories that you feature on your broadcast. So I really do appreciate how you've been hanging in with me on this, because this is a little different, to say the least. But we're hoping also, we are trying to get some interest with film and television with it, because the characters are really interesting. The surroundings that they're in is pretty, you know, very different. You know, if you're going to be in the most top secret research and development base in the country, you know, it's going to be that type of surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been to a few bases around the country. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's very cool. So as part of your job, you were able to visit them. That's really neat.
I was fortunate. I got I mean, I was in South Dakota for a while, and there, some of the parts I was in, I mean, the snow removal equipment alone was just super epic. I mean, they seriously get snow, and they, you know, they have these devices that I've never seen anywhere else. And it was just kind of funny. It was like whiplash, because when I left there and I moved to Georgia, that whole city shut down when they got 4 inches of snow. And I was like, you have to be kidding. I mean, I've seen snow above my shoulder, you know. But anyway, I have seen very forbidding climates and stuff. I remember one day we had like over 50-mile-an-hour winds, and I called off to my job when I saw a roof sliding down the street. I was like, there's no way I'm going to get to work safely. And I've seen my share of tornadoes and stuff. I mean, because I wasn't born there, I pretty much did what a lot of people would do in that situation, which is just scream and run. But the locals were putting out their lawn chairs and getting ready to take a selfie, because they're used to it, you know. But it was that I found kind of funny. But I was fortunate. I was able to you know, visit some bases and take some note of my surroundings and stuff, and meet some really fascinating people. And military base communities are really strong communities. You know, if someone's having a baby or whatever, everyone helps out. I mean, there's so many things that they're just very strong communities. I was very thankful to have been around them.
No, that sounds really neat, and I wish you luck getting a movie deal. An author friend of mine is actually working on that for her series of World War II. It's like sorcerers they were fighting the Nazis.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's based on the women who fought who were in military intelligence and stuff, and in espionage in the Second World War. It's very neat. Yeah, so I wish you. It sounds like yours is somewhere in that end of World War II, between now period of the Cold War arms race type of, maybe towards the end of that
Here's
period
a
of
little
time.
here's a little facts for your friend. My other friend's family is they were Nazi war resistors and Norwegians, and the paperclip was invented there.
That's neat.
And so what people did as a sign that they were opposed to the Nazis is they would wear paper clips. And so
Wow.
if you look it up, the paperclip became a symbol of war resistance. And it started out as an underground thing that you would just sort of discreetly hide one somewhere on your clothing. And it was, in some ways, a sort of fun gesture of disrespect that people would find an interesting way every day to wear their paperclip out. But definitely wear it to show, hey, I'm not on board with this. I'm not with the program here.
Right.
So it was the paperclip. It was a symbol of defiance, and a symbol of national pride, and a symbol of, we're not with the program here. We're not one of the haters.
Oh, that's neat. I did not know that about the paperclip. I know that there were many different types of resistance. The ways that people were showing their resistance. But that's really neat that the humble paperclip was one of them. Thanks for sharing that interesting tidbit. And thanks for coming on the podcast and telling us about the base. It definitely sounds interesting. It's definitely. Oh, go on. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, I really appreciate you having me. And I know that, like I said, I know I'm not typical with this, and I know it takes a little bit of a walkthrough to sort of latch on to it.
Yeah, but you did email me, and I did say, yeah, come on the podcast. So, and I did see that it didn't mention fantasy elements, and I was like, we'll just talk about it on the podcast. If it is, you'll tell me where it is, and we'll talk about it. If it isn't, you'll tell us what it is and why it is, and I figured we'd just handle it on the podcast.
No, I really appreciate you having me, and I appreciate you sort of following along with it. I know it takes a little bit for people to get traction with it, but I'm really thankful that you gave me this opportunity to share it with folks, and I you're very easy to talk to, and
oh, thanks.
No, I mean,
well, I was curious because I do read a lot of espionage books. The Mitch Rapps, the Diva Baldacci has the two. I forgot the name of that series, and there's just a whole lot of them. So I was curious, where did this fit into that spectrum of books that I read, but don't usually talk about on the podcast. So thank you for coming on and playing along and being patient with me.
Yeah, well,
I feel bad. I feel like I grilled you, but it's like one of my favorite genres to read. So like I was grilling you as a reader, not as like a fellow author, and I hope that came across.
Oh, totally. I mean, you're very easy to talk to. I wasn't, sometimes I get nervous around people and stuff like that. I mean, just very easy to talk to. I can tell, I could tell that you were a writer by the way you were sort of, navigating and stuff. And I'm looking forward to exploring some of your works as well.
Oh, thank you. I write epic fantasy adventures.
Cool.
They're quirky. Some of them are closer to the I can't think of the word. The tropes and the more traditional fantasy, and some of them are just off the wall zany. I make no apologies for that.
No, just go for it.
These guys behind me are much closer to the classic traditional fantasy. They remind me somewhat of the Deathgate cycle by Tracy.
Well, I
Margaret
think
Weiss and Tracy Hickson. They remind. There's a bit of. There's something about it that reminds me of it, even though I haven't read it. There's those books in a while. No,
but I think it's really, really cool that we that we do what we have to do like during the day and stuff like that, but we have this little universe that we get to come home to.
Yes.
And you know, and it's just always just a lot of fun, you know, to when I'm on the bus thinking about like I think I need to kill this person, you know.
Those are good bus thoughts.
Yeah, and then you have these other people right across from you, and they're, and they don't realize that you're not killing an actual person, that it's time for you to eliminate a character. That's a more graceful way of saying it, but it's just funny to have these like two lives in
Right.
yeah.
Right. Now I know all about that.
Good.
All about that. I'm not sure I could be a full-time author. I think I would just get nothing accomplished. I need something to eat up a lot of my time.
Well, I think the type of work that I've mainly been involved in as a baker and pastry chef, like when you're sitting there, cracking eggs and you have to wait until that egg is swirled in, and then it can get kind of boring and repetitive, and so your mind wanders. And so that's it. I'm fortunate that I don't allow it to wander when I have things in the oven.
Yes.
I just say to
That could be
myself,
bad.
no. And I have timers, and my timer, you could probably hear it a block away. I mean, that thing will wake the dead, But when you work as a baker, a lot of times you work overnight shift. So you need a timer that's going to wake the dead.
Yes. And baking is there's a lot of science in baking. There's a lot of chemistry. You have to get things precise. If you let it go, if you're cooking a stew and you let it go a few too many minutes long, it may be fine. If you bake something a little too long, you've just ruined it.
Or else if you put too much of something, because you can't really taste a loaf of bread when it is the dough. You can't really taste the outcome. So you don't really know if you made a mistake when you were, measuring everything out first until it comes out the oven, which we all hope it will be happy and, come out right. But it's always kind of fun, some of those scenarios.
Yeah. Baking is definitely more of a science.
I just have to, I just have to keep remembering to rein in the brain.
Yeah.
Like once something's in the oven or once it's on the stove, it's not playtime, it's like work time. I have to give it 100% of my focus. It's very tempting to have a runaway brain for me. I have to do a lot of work to smack it down.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well,
as a writer, yeah.
We're glad that you were able to do that in order to write the base. And thank you for coming on. And all the links that you mentioned are in the show notes of the description. So if you didn't get a chance to write them down, don't worry. You can just click them. And that'll be a wrap for this episode. I hope you'll check out the base. And we'll see you next time with with another author. I think the next one is a fantasy author. I don't remember. They signed up a while ago. And another book. So have a great day or great night wherever you are.